Thank you. My name is Keith Bolender, and I am going to make this short and sweet. I know you're all here to see and hear the Cubans. I am not Cuban. I am not American. I am Canadian. That's not a political comment, it's a statement of fact. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out here tonight. I'd especially like to thank Lori and Answer for having me to be a part of this special evening. My book, Voices from the Other Side, An Oral History of Terrorism Against Cuba, is based on dozens of interviews with ordinary Cubans across the island. These are Cubans who have been directly victimized by these acts of terrorism or have had friends and families members killed. The intent of the book is to reveal the stories of these individual Cubans. Most of these incidents are well known within Cuba, but obviously almost completely unknown outside of the island. I'd actually like to give thanks to one of your favorite presidents, and I'm being sarcastic, George Bush Jr., for helping to convince me to write this book. He set the standard for defining terrorism in the aftermath of 9/11. When he ended the dubious distinction of one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter. He said there is no such thing as a good terrorist. No political cause can justify the killing of innocent civilians. Unfortunately, this is just one of another standard the Americans set for the rest of the world, but do not apply to themselves. And as everyone is familiar with, people like Luis Posada Carribas, who is a well-known mastermind of the Cubana Airlines bombing and the hotel bombing campaign in Havana and Veradero in 1997, is living freely within the United States and in Miami. The two incidents I mentioned, the Cubana Airlines and the hotel bombing campaign in Havana and Veradero, are well known, and I do cover them in the book. But the intent of the book is to bring some of the incidences that may not be known to most people. Incidents like the attack on the village of Boca de Sama in 1971. It was a small village, fishing village, 14 wooden homes, one schoolhouse, that was attacked by members of Alpha 66. 2 people were killed, 8 were injured. Or the explosion of La Cubre munition ship in Havana Harbor in 1961. More than 100 people were killed, 300 injured, and in the event, one person who I interviewed in the book helped save the lives of Fidel, Raul, and Che. Or the literacy campaign in 1960, where hundreds of thousands of students went out to help those living in the countryside to read and write. More than a dozen of these student teachers were murdered because of that participation. Or Operation Peter Pan, an insidious plan to have middle-level Cubans send their children outside of the country based on a series of lies promoted by the Cuban church under the auspices of the State Department. These are some of the incidents that may not be known, or if they are known, you may not know the specific people involved and the individual Cubans that are still suffering from these acts of terrorism. More than 700 acts of terrorism have been identified by the Cuban government, resulting in the deaths of 3,400 people and thousands more injured. The terror has also had a social cost to the Cuban society, the people, and the government, and I explore that theme in the book as well. Just as importantly, it has led directly to the arrest of the Cuban Five. The Cuban Five were in Miami to help thwart further acts of terrorism from counter-revolutionary organizations in southern Florida. We all know the story of what happened, how they were uncovered, how they are still being incarcerated. The book puts in context why the Five were needed in Florida in the first place. And you can't understand the history of the Cuban Five without understanding the long history of this unknown war against terrorism. And unfortunately for the American people, this unknown war is just that. The American political elite and the media has been very effective in keeping these incidents secret. So the Cuban Five suffer because they were there to help the Cuban individuals and the Cuban government from stopping more acts of terrorism that are well known in Cuba and absolutely unknown outside of the island and in the United States. So the intent of the book was to bring these victim stories to light, to make them more important in the act, to tell their stories. Many of them were older. Their stories are going to be lost in the next 5 or 10 years. It was a way to record their history. And I tried to capture their own personalities. Many of these incidents happened 30, 40 years ago, but they still have the effect as it happened last week. And also to reveal one of the most insidious and aggressive portions of American policy against Cuba. And to show how it's affected the society and how it's helped, how it has influenced the denial and the retardation of what the revolution wanted to accomplish. The book is available at the back. It's forwarded by an up-and-coming young writer by the name of Noam Chomsky. I don't know if you know. And that's my speech. I thank you very much for your time.